Good morning and welcome to this fourth in a series of webinars dealing with risk management topics of interest to the industry. Today's topic is performance monitors for safety and claims administration, and we have the benefit of two excellent experienced speakers to discuss the subject. My name is Rick Denning, and I am president of Shelter Island Risk Services, a firm that has been operating independently 1994 and focused on bringing effective technology to risk management and claims and safety. We have learned over the years that an educated client is by far our most important consumer, and we're hoping these series does add in that direction. This morning, joining me in this discussion are two very qualified individuals. And let me introduce them, but let me also give you a bit of background that both of these individuals will be speaking on their individual points of views and opinions, and not necessarily that of their individual organizations. Also, even at this stage, I will encourage you to take advantage of one of the things the webinar provides, and that is the ability to raise questions to any of us, and those will be logged in as we proceed through the program, and at the end we intend to preserve enough time to address them. So let me then introduce these panelists. I'll start with Rich Rabs, who is Claims Manager of Veolia Transportation. It may not be a name that rolls off the tongue, but it is a major transportation provider operating out of Paris, and transportation unit is part of Veolia in It is one of the largest private transit operators in North America, providing rail, bus, paratransit, shuttle, and taxi service. They've got the pedal bikes yet, but that may be on the agenda. They have over 200 major transportation contracts for cities, transit authorities, and airports. Rich has 25 years of claims experience and risk management experience, including over 10 in the transportation industry. His background prior to Veolia has developed as, in essence, a triple threat. He has had solid experience as in insurance operations, a TPA, and a national broker. He's also a very effective educator and has been recognized as an outstanding course leader for the AICPCU for some of their courses dealing with claims. He has a BA in journalism and a AIC and ARM designation from the Insurance Institute of America. And next, James Ciaramitaro is Senior Safety Manager at Ahold USA. Interesting, both of these organizations are based in Europe. Ahold is a Dutch corporation, but here in the U.S., Ahold operates nearly 800 Stop and Shop and Giant supermarket stores. Jim's role as this Director of Head of Safety has existed for the past 11 years, and prior to that, he has 10 years experience as a safety consultant with Marsh and with Sedgwick, and began his career right out of school working for the Hartford. He's a certified safety professional, a graduate of the University of Massachusetts, and speaking of risk management, has two teenage daughters. He is an avid sports fan in the Boston area, but other than that, which I'm afraid Rich also shares, they're really pretty good people. I think it best to open our program with giving them a little chance to talk about themselves and kind of set the framework for their comments that will be coming. So if you would, and I'll start with Rich, just give a little background along these lines, and then we'll move to Jim.
Okay, thank you, Rick. I like to refer to myself as an accidental risk manager. Like many of us of my age in the industry, we probably didn't go to school for insurance. How we got here is a track that many of us took in a very different way. But you know, my career started in personal lines with an insurer, moved over to commercial lines and with the TPA, working with clients and brokers, ended up going over to the brokerage, and then over to the client side, which is where I'm at now. So as you can see, it was definitely a mistaken plan. My greatest pride, aside from my 4 daughters, would probably be my career when it comes to the industry, and how things, when bad things happen, my career, my job gets very interesting. And it's not necessarily what happens to the, obviously you never want to celebrate a bad event, but I think that what we do as claims people, when something bad happens, is we ultimately help people, and I think that's probably a very prideful thing, when because people are at a loss when these things happen. So, and my greatest frustration is probably the U.S. legal system, not on a day-to-day basis, but we all can think of the claims where somebody has been unjustly rewarded and receives an undue gain for something that they really shouldn't have. So that's probably my greatest frustration. Again, the events that shaped my career are mainly accidental ones. My move to Chicago, as most guys will understand, I got married, and my wife, I now live 1.1 mile away from my outlaws, and that took me from personal lines to commercial lines. And from there, I think now when I talk to people about where they want to go, I strongly suggest commercial lines because I think it opens up things. So, Rick, that's probably a little bit more than people needed to know about me.
Thank you very much, Rich. And Jim?
Good morning, everyone. Much like Rich, I didn't start off thinking that I'd have a career in safety and risk management. I guess out of college, the natural evolution was for me to, out of college, after loss control representative job at the Hartford Insurance Group, I found that I had an affinity for workplace safety. And after a few years at the Hartford, went on and received a master's degree with a concentration in ergonomics, and worked for a time as a safety manager at Cumberland Farms convenience stores. You may be familiar with Cumbies, and found out that I really enjoyed the workplace safety aspect of the job. So went on and as a consultant for several years with Cedric and Marsh, I found that I could get great satisfaction by working with organizations directly and try to make a difference. And my greatest pride, I would say, in the field is that, and I truly believe this, that I believe myself and my staff, we make a difference in the lives of our customers and our employees every day. And it's bared out where, there had been no or little talk or culture of safety in the organizations that I've worked for. But we've been able to do some great things by instilling safety with some key performance indicators that require our managers to keep safety in the forefront of their minds every day. And with that said, and it's probably true on everybody, for everybody on the call, is that my greatest frustration, I guess, would be that my department's agenda isn't the number one agenda on the organizations that I've worked for, and sometimes we see that the progress that we want to make in changing a culture and improving the safety performance of the organizations moves a lot slower than what we would like with the organizational changes and the high turnover and acquisitions and things that go on in businesses, that safety isn't always the number one topic. So that can be frustrating sometimes. And much like Rich says, the events that shape your career, they're accidental events or big events in terms of losses. We've had several fatalities and amputations, and when these events happen, it really calls to arms and really makes you pull up your bootstraps and do the right thing for associates and customers. So that's me.
All right, thank you. Thank you both. This has not been a random pick. I have had the benefit of working with both of these individuals, and I couldn't be more impressed with their abilities to work within their organizations and really get things done. Let me talk briefly about the 3 goals that is the purpose of this webinar this morning. The first American to win a Nobel Prize once made a statement that if you can't put numbers on, you really don't know much about it. And I think that applies to safety and risk management claims. Measuring is a critical part, and I'll be interested in getting thoughts from both the speakers about that process. Secondly, Jim said it well. I have yet to find a company in which risk management runs the company. Now, maybe ERM is going to change that at some point down the line, but you have to leverage the organization and take the organization's culture as the vehicle to make claims management safety successful. And that's how we want to learn from them how they're doing it. And finally, there's been many kind of tongue-in-cheek stories about how safety and risk management or claims can have absolutely different conclusions and diametrically opposite strategies. That's not, I think, in the future. And I'd like to learn more about how to align safety and claims as allies and not adversaries. It's been said by these speakers, and you'll find out that there's an awful lot of overlap despite their titles. I think you'll find that both of them know the other side of the coin and can discuss it. So starting with that, Rich, start with claims and some of the tools you use to monitor what probably is the most difficult problem, and that's that claims change with time. They're not like a payroll amount, but they change sometimes dramatically. What are your thoughts?
Well, I wish my payroll changed like my claim reserves. But, Rick, we do both a weekly and a monthly monitor. The weekly, I'll be honest with you, like all organizations, we have to report our reserves and our growths and record them on our books on a monthly basis. So what we do is we also monitor them weekly because I don't know about anyone else out there, but the last thing I want to do is surprise my boss at the end of the month and tell him, hey, we got a bad month, because then it's going to make for a very bad month for me. So we look at the growth of not only the reserve dollars but the paid dollars each month, so that we can measure where we're at both on a policy year as well as a calendar year-to-date experience. And when you ask about the early warning signs of the extreme claims, I think we all know that when we have a fatality or a very bad event, we pretty much know what we got. We may not know the individual claims, but we know what we've got. I think the tougher ones that we need to really look for the early warning signs of those claims that hide in the weeds. We all know that claims are not like fine wine. They do not get better with age. So looking for those ones that sit in the weeds, the ones that start to age, no activity going on. A lot of times that's because plaintiff's attorneys are not participating in the process. They're playing hide the ball or whatever you want to call it. But those are the ones we have to identify. So what we do on a regular basis is we go into the deep dive looking for those old claims that aren't moving along to find out why they're not moving along, so that we don't 3 years later find that we've got a problem. Because remember, going back to that first thing we talked about, never want to surprise the boss. A reserve pop from, say, 10,000 to 250,000 or $1 million, those are tough to explain 3 or 4 years post-occurrence. So that's what we do, Rick.
Excellent. And Jim, we'll give you a chance to fill in the other side of the coin here.
Yeah, we operate in a high, unlike probably a lot of industries, in the retail industry, we operate in a high frequency, claims frequency, in a low severity environment, and we have lots of incidents, and I believe many of those do go unreported. So in order for us to be effective, we need to look at all of our incidents, near misses included, because each one of those could be a severe incident in due time, and be able to take action. And what we do is we track claims on a daily basis with nearly 800 locations. We get a fair amount of reported incidents each day. So what we do is we set up a system where we're able to review the claims for the prior day, and then take action if we need to take action in a response kind of manner. And then on a monthly basis, we run individual reports on the rates. We compare the incident rates for customer injuries as well as associated injuries per location and division and district. to kind of see how our different locations are trending. And then we compare with the performance over last year. And then on a quarterly basis, we do a more comprehensive look at how well stores and districts and divisions and regions are doing relative to last year. And what makes it imperative for us is to use the loss data to drive our safety initiatives and to motivate performance, and certainly to identify our target locations that need immediate attention based on their recent trending.
Very good. Actually, Jim has graciously given us a slide that we'll discuss a bit later that shows concretely what kind of monitoring they are doing in the Ahold organizations. Going back to Rich, everybody, I think, realizes that when we talk about claims and maybe even safety, it's the extreme events which tend to drive the numbers, but there ought to be a bigger picture of that, and I wonder if you could give us kind of a profile of, from your point of view, good, bad, and ugly.
Sure. Well, I think that when we talk about experience, and as Rick, you probably point out, the Clint Eastwood experience here, the good, the bad, and the ugly, isn't necessarily decided by the magnitude of the event. From my perspective, good, bad, and the ugly is generally determined by the investigation and the quality of the investigation that we do. I guess it sort of defines which version we get. For instance, I mean, it's very simple. I mean, probably one of the best claims ever in my career that we handled was a small little choking incident at a hotel restaurant where a woman was eating a hamburger and ended up getting something like a bobby pin stuck in her throat, but it wasn't a bobby pin. The general manager and I, we went in, we looked at everything, we went through, we were investigating the claim. I can't emphasize the true good experience come down to the investigation and boots on the ground. So we're going through his restaurant, we're going through the front of the restaurant, the back of the restaurant. Finally, we were sitting there talking to each other going, where the heck did this thing come from? Did it come in the meat? And as we're sitting there, one of the chefs starts cleaning the grill with a wire brush, and it was this aha moment. Sure enough, that's where it had come from. It was an old brush. It was supposed to have been thrown out and hadn't been. So, I guess what that also will tell you is a lot of your good experience comes from dumb luck. I can share bad and ugly stories, but I'll let Jim. I just want everyone to understand. Claims succeed on the investigation.
That's absolutely true on the safety side as well, Rich. You know, we somewhat have consistent loss experiences in our organization. Most of our associate and customer claims are either slips and falls or strain-related injuries, and it's been fairly consistent over the years. And probably the ugliest thing that can happen is when you've done an investigation and you've identified the controls that need to be in place to prevent recurrences, and you roll it out, but for whatever reason, they're not comprehensively and completely applied across the organization, and the same type of accident happens. And nothing is, I think personally, certainly severe injuries are unfortunate, but nothing is, I think, uglier than knowing the solution, having an action plan in place to prevent a problem, and then it not being taken hold of in the organization. But conversely, when you're looking at investigations, there's some good things that can happen. And you can identify an exposure and then implement initiatives that can produce a loss reduction to reduce the risk. And an example that I have is, you know, when I first joined the organization and we're looking at accidents, it would seem that there was a high preponderance of in our deli departments of folks slicing their fingers on the deli slicers. So, you know, we did an investigation, found out what the responsible conditions or contributing factors were, put together a behavior-based observation program as well as some equipment changes, and we were able to see a precipitous drop in the number of slicer lacerations that we've had. And it's been sustained, and it really comes down to really good investigations. So, you know, in addition to that, you know, there's some bad things that happen. Like I said, most things are consistent, but there's some unforeseen strange, I say exotic losses that you don't expect, that when they do happen, it really turns into a bad scene. It changes the way that we do business for the most part, but those are the loss experiences that we've had. We've had consistent losses, we've had things that aren't foreseen, and we try to learn from the losses, Rick, to make sure that they don't recur.
Excellent. Well, let's move on to a little discussion of, you can't have any discussion with measurement that doesn't address technology. And I know both these firms have been committed and for a long time with various RMIS systems. And I think they present good models for using them effectively. On that basis, Jim, let me start with you. Can you just kind of give us an overview of your involvement with technology, and more importantly, in a sense, is what's missing? What ought to be done that with all the millions of data records that we've got right now, what are we missing that really ought to be the next phase?
And Rick, that's not an understatement. Millions of records and data points. It's been reported in our industry, and it may be consistent in yours as well, that 5% of our workers' comp claims account for over 75% of our costs. So it's really imperative that we're able to mine the information to identify opportunities for safety intervention, and then also the reduction of claims costs. We use the STAR systems, and we've got several things going on where we're trying to evaluate the data to identify and compare amongst all of our different divisions and regions and parts of the country, the type of injuries that we have, the jobs that folks do, the time of the day that the accidents happen, the day of the week, to get a better idea of what we can do to target our loss reduction activities. So, using the data to drive safety is critical for our success. And Rick asked, what else do we need to do? And one of the things that we have experience with is, in order to extract anything meaningful out of the data, that it needs to go into the system pretty good. So we have to have a high level of detail to get what we want to get out of the losses, but probably not capturing all the things that we need to do is probably our greatest need.
Very good. And Rich, same issue.
Sure. I mean, understanding, Rick, you're talking about dinosaur here. I was barely able to get into this webinar. But,
You're doing fine.
Thanks. I mean, you have to understand, when I started in this business, we talked about, the new wave was these dumb terminals. Then we went on to 286s and 386s, and now we've got Windows 7. I didn't even see Windows 6. But I used to, in some of my classes, I'd talk about it back in the old days when we took a statement from it with a hammer and chisel, and then modified that because I realized that the classes were getting a little younger and so more relevant. They'd understand technology. And I'd say, back in the days when we had a 286 with a monochrome screen, and they'd look at me like, what the heck are you talking about? So there's no doubt that the technology, the box itself has changed. But then what we do with it, I mean, when I first started in this business, we get a claim, run. Then I'd take out my calculator and a pencil and I'd start bracketing and I'd do the math. And now all that's done automatically for us, the reports that we're able to generate just by the push of a button. So it's made our jobs on the claims and risk side a whole lot easier. I can tell our business development group how much is it costing at a specific location. I can tell my boss, where we've got problems and where things are successful, and all with the push of a button, which is so much different because, like all organizations, we have to measure our operations, and of course, on our side of it, we also have to price our services, and all that's done. By the way, in our organization, the claims cost is the single largest variable cost that we have. So when you go into what else do we need, I forgot one other thing I wanted to mention. What we've done is we've actually merged our claims and safety data through a product called FE's Web Risk, and what it allows is our safety compliance manual to be seen. Records can be seen by our adjusting court and vice versa. Our safety folks get to see what's going on in the claims world. Maybe not all the detail, but where the events are happening, how the events are happening, what it is. In the old days, they had to request special reports from the claims folks to determine what the primary sources and types of accidents they were having. Now they can run those reports themselves. So I guess what I'd say, what we need in the future is just an open mind. I mean, when I started and we got into these computers, we got this thing called adjuster notes online. I mean, for a guy who used to wear out pens and pencils and pads of paper, starting to type was different. So I'd suggest to folks that keep your open mind, because now anybody who works in our industry already knows we type in our notes. So that's what I think there.
Very good. Thank you. I can trump your ace, though. I remember when people used to take the corporate systems loss runs and build igloos around their offices or make them into dividers. They'd be about 4 or 5 inches at least every month. Let's talk a little bit about communications and how you
say that we
work within the environment that you are a part of. And I'll start now with Jim on the safety side. Jim?
Rick, it looks like we may have lost him on the monitor.
Okay, why don't we jump down to the second point and let you discuss it from a claims perspective, but it's a similar communication issue.
Oh. It looks like Jim's back now.
Yep.
Jim.
Oh, yes. You want to go?
Jim, the first point is on safety communications to your field and to your management. I know this is a big thing with Stop and Shop, so give us a little background about how that's evolved and what it's doing today.
Thanks, Rick. I apologize for that. My phone dropped off for some reason. But in our organization, and probably not like a lot of organizations, we measure everything, and we compare, sales, customer counts, margins, shrink, to budget, to last year's performance, and we also do the same thing about losses. So, we've conditioned our operations folks to look at loss numbers and to look at the metrics and to compare and then hold folks accountable for the results. But the industry is also, and probably just like most industries, we're extremely competitive, and competitive with our, fellow grocery chains, but also internally. And everybody wants to be the best in their district, in their region, and in their division. So we also rank stores based on losses on best to worst. And then inherent in I think the DNA of store operators is a cost control component. With low margins, there's a major focus on trying to drive down the cost of doing business. So we kind of leverage that motivating factor with the reduction of losses, but also the reduction of the claims costs. So that gets folks in our organization pretty much in tune to doing the right things around safety and claims control. But when it comes down to to communication, we pretty much rely a lot on electronic media. We have an intranet. We distribute reports. We have conference calls, little short webinars just like this one to get the safety message across, which turns it's an extremely efficient way to deliver a consistent and a complete message to the whole chain wreck.
I'll move to Rich, but I just want to emphasize for anybody out there who's a safety purist is how easily Jim moves between claims side information and safety information. So, Rich, what's your view of this process, particularly in terms of allocation or cost of risk? And Jim, I know you have a comment about allocation as well.
Well, yeah, Rick, I mean, I view the divide between responsibility of operations and claims administration. Obviously, we view operations as having a prevention side, and in our organization, they bear the cost of claims. Our claims administrator is responsible for results, loss cost measures, and loss cost averages. So when we talk with prevention and costs, one of the things, not unlike what Jim just said, we do webinars and presentations on what they can do once a claim occurs. Obviously, our safety group is around to help them prevent. But we do push back 100% of the cost of our claims. So we get an immediate attention. As I said earlier, when your largest single variable cost is claims, it tends to get the attention of the individual managers. So we provide them with monthly loss runs, and of course, and of course, they see it in their P&L. And on the claim side, with the results, I mean, we're constantly working with how can we do things better with our TPA. I mean, through audits and reviews, obviously, but also what products. We just recently worked with them on implementing a legal bill review solution where we're seeing we're going to save about $500,000 just by utilizing on an annual basis. So these are the types of things for the results side that we look to measure.
And to Rich's point, in charging back the premium to all the different locations and what the losses cost them, we do something similar where we charge back the losses to the divisions, but within the divisions and the different locations, there's an allocation structure where if you're a location that does really well, it's not just in terms of claims, but also safety performance, then you can be pay a lot less for the claims that you have. And I think the next slide, Rick, will kind of illustrate that point.
We'll get there in just a sec. We do have a comment about self-administration, but so Rich, I know you've juggled this issue. You've got a background that gives you a pretty broad perspective on the subject. What's your conclusions about that choice?
The conclusion would be yes, both work. We are once again in that struggle, looking at the pros and cons of self-administration, and we view it primarily as a cost-benefit analysis. I mean, when we look at outsourcing to a TPA, we're looking at we don't have the administrative function of the personnel management. We don't have to hire, we don't have to fire, review. We don't provide benefits. You know, the typical employee costs and the employee headaches. Nor do we have the E&O issue. If one of our adjusters makes a mistake, the TPA is responsible for that. On the converse side, when you look at self-administration, there's talk of lower cost, which is the primary driver, but there's also a greater control element that you get. So to say one over the other is better, I think is really determined by the organization and how much effort they want to put into it.
Rich, when you're talking about
comment,
when you're talking about self-administration, our organization is a claims self-administration company, and really the greatest benefit that we have in having adjusters that belong to our company is that when there's a claim made, they're not dealing with the client and the claimant. They're dealing with a store manager, or they're dealing with a customer or an employee, and they can speak the language of our business, and that's really attractive. In addition to what you spoke about, it's a reduced cost, but there is a challenge associated with a homegrown claims self-administration organization where you're always struggling to homegrown the best-in-class claims organization, and that is something that we continually struggle with. So it is a trade-off. You get the benefit of having folks that know your business, that are able to articulate to your customers that they're part of the business. But on the other side, you always find yourself challenged to be the best in class.
Benchmarking, which I guess would answer that, is a challenge, even in the size of organizations that you have. So that's something that would be a great benefit if we could find the right way to do it. Speaking of that, here is a slide that Jim has developed for ranking his stores within districts, as he just indicated. Let me turn it back to Jim to just quickly look at the structure of this thing, which might have some application to others on the call.
Yes, this is a scorecard that we use, and the easiest thing to do is to look at your numbers and results and report back, as how well you did this year compared to last year, both in general liability, then also in workers' compensation. But we've gone ahead and also melded the two measures into what we call the loss index, which enables us to provide our operators with a succinct tool, a benchmark that you can look at and be able to rank stores. This particular example is 12 stores within one district, and we're able to rank the stores in regards to results, loss results, from best to worst. But that doesn't tell the whole picture. In order to get to the results that you desire, it's important that your operators are performing the activities that will help drive losses to be lower. And we go ahead and, on this particular report, we go ahead and measure compliance with safety committees, compliance with getting reports in within a day, compliance with points on an operations audit, as well as how often folks walk the stores. That we require folks to walk the stores every hour, and we're able to measure that and provide feedback, as well as we'd also do a comprehensive safety audit of all the things that are expected from OSHA compliance to loss prevention items. We do this audit, and we're able to give folks a score as to how well they did. And the last column that you see here is the consequences of a good safety performance. If you meet certain criteria amongst those safety performance items, then you're classified either as an A or a B store. And an A store will pay, actually a B store, if they were to have an incident in the store, will pay 4 times for that incident than an A store would. So it's an internal motivating factor. It's something that the stores and the locations can control. They can do the activities. If they do the activities and they have a loss, they will not be charged as heavily as they would if they were not doing the activities. So that's able to motivate performance and also leverage the organization's culture around cost control as well.
Thank you, Jim. I think for all of us, it's rare for somebody to be broad enough to be combining GL and workman's comp, but even more so, as I've heard Jim speak at various times, bring in the performance, the compliance kind of information, which may or may not have resulted in a claim, but it gives a better profile of the whole store's ranking. And I'm sure that A or B designation means a lot to a store manager bonuses potential. Let's go along. Jim, safety. People think mostly in terms of proactive education, compliance, and so forth. Tell us about that role in your function, and perhaps anything you're using for standards that you're evaluating yourself against.
Sure, Rick. We've tapped into the online training craze, if you will. It's an easy way for us to deliver consistent a message, but also it enables us to better track who's taking the safety classes that we administer. Certainly from an OSHA compliance standpoint, there are things that we need to train all of our associates every year. And in order to meet that compliance, we found that doing it online is the easiest and the most comprehensive way of doing it. But in regards to getting the human touch and having a hands-on approach, we have safety committees in every one of our stores and locations, and we use those forums to cascade relevant information that will be pertinent at the time. Issues more or less pertaining to loss prevention, not so much OSHA compliance issues, but certainly slip and fall prevention, strain injury prevention, lockout, tagout, things that require more of a personal touch. We develop safety skill builders and share those with the safety committees to cascade to the associates in our stores. And you get on here that we do participate in the Department of Labor annual surveys. We complete between 130 to 150 Department of Labor accident injury surveys each year. And but what we found is that a lot of times the information that's fed back to us from the Department of Labor and even from our industry peers, it's difficult to translate that because we're using different methods of determining lost time claims or exposure bases. So we pretty much use standards that we measure against ourselves in our different regions and also for prior year's experience.
Very good, thank you. And Rich, I know how shy you are, so it must have been quite a shock to actually have to present to some of your brokers and underwriters the results of your programs.
Quite so. Before I get there, though, I did want to follow on what Jim had talked about. We also participate in industry standard reporting, and as Jim has pointed out, I find it better to measure ourselves against us against ourselves rather than an industry that doesn't have a consistent approach. With regard to the underwriters, though, you know, it's underwriting and a submission is more than just, or getting insurance is more than just a submission these days. When I first started working on presentations with brokers, I used to refer to myself as the halftime entertainment at lunch. Between the meal and dessert, I would get to talk about some of our best incidents and what we had done. And from that, what really grew was an understanding that the brokers and more importantly the underwriters want to understand what we do with claims and you know, what kind. Absolutely, they want to understand the type and magnitude of our claims, because obviously the cost of our claims will determine their costs. But they want to understand. They want to know that we understand our claims and that we and how we manage our claims. You know, do we have 24/7 operations, and if so, do we have 24/7 claim services? I mean, how do we respond when a bad incident happens? I mean, we have a whole protocol for these types of things. And the underwriters want to know this. So when we get out there, it's not just a story about the individual claims, but it's also a story about what we understand of the claims, what we learn from the claims, you know, and those types of things. For them, it's as much about understanding what we know as well as the claims themselves.
Very good. Let me move then on to our kind of ultimate issue. You're professionals. You're measured in terms of your own careers. How do you, at the end of the day, how do you measure the success of claims and safety performance? Let me start with Jim.
Well, certainly, you know, incident rates are the easiest way, and you know, looking at it over a historic period of time, it's great to see a trend where incident rates are coming down and come to the conclusion that we're successful. But the real measure comes down into how the organization is performing, the activities that result in reduced exposure and reduced loss. And too frequently, you'll see incident rates that'll go down for a certain location, and there'll be, quite frankly, no reason for it. It just is luck. There's not a lot of claims, and then next year, in subsequent years, you'll see a spike up. And the bottom line was that there wasn't the infrastructure to address the exposures. So the key really is to establish expectations of safety, some concrete measures, and then, and it sounds like a dirty word, but to go out and to audit those criteria, and not really talking about conditional things or physical things to audit, but more or less the behavioral aspects of the organization to identify how well and how robust and how the culture is developing so that folks in the organization are doing the right things when accidents happen or pre-accident things that are happening.
Rich, same standard, same question.
Thanks, Rick. Well, I think most claims people will tell you the best and most successful claims is a closed claim. But obviously, we have a list of matrices ourselves. I mean, our average cost per claim, how long are they open, what's our closing ratio. I think Jim talked about 5% of claims equal 75% of the cost. We've measured it where 4% of our claims equal 80% of our costs. So you can see where we're doing that. One of the things, a good example is by going through this data, we've found that our bicyclists and pedestrian claims tend to be more expensive type of claims. Now, I think that's probably intuitive when you think of the size of the transit bus versus the size of a bicycle and the protections that each afford. But as a result of that, and a result of the measures, we've now put a specific program in place through our safety department where it's clear that, and that to the field, the expense and exposure that these create to them. So we've watched a nice program where we've now dropped our claims year over year for these types of incidents by 25%. Ideally, we drop them by 100%, but it's through those measures that we're able to get to this information.
Very good. I just want to bring us to our conclusion here. Let me just bring this here so to preserve some time for questions. I think what we've learned from both the dialogue of Jim and Rich is that safety and claims are in essence Siamese twins, and if you're going to succeed, both must succeed. There's no such thing as one against the other. Although I do recall some instances where safety managers could come and show they're reducing frequencies, but then the next guy in the office is the risk manager who is translating that into dollars, and the situation looks horribly different. Now we get that integration that they've been talking about. I'm going to ask my colleague, Josh Marino, if there are some questions that have been submitted during the course of this presentation or right now, that we could cover them in the course of the 10 minutes or so that we have remaining. Josh, you can unmute. Just one question that I've been struggling with that I'll ask Jim about.
Hello, can you hear me? Sorry about that. I was having a volume issue. Okay, yes, we have received a question. Someone from the audience would like to know, do incident rates actually take cost in dollars into consideration? And is average cost per claim actually used as a metric for success and for allocation purposes?
Oh, an easy one. I'll give that to Jim.
Yeah, well, in regards to the safety aspect and also the slide that I'd put up, incident rates are cost of claims are not included in the rates. And the allocation process, we do not incorporate the average cost of the claims in the on the allocation process.
Rich, you want to comment on that as well?
We do use our average cost of claim as an internal measure of success, but it doesn't translate to the measure of success for the field operations as they get their actual costs submitted back to them.
Averages are deceptive and dangerous, to be honest with you. Our work shows that you can have an average claim of $3,000, but still, in the same kind of metrics that both Jim and Rich alluded to, that 3 or 4% of the claims are in the hundreds of thousands of dollar range, and that's what's driving the total picture. So an average is an interesting statistic, but look at the whole distribution before you run off that basis.
Exactly. That's why we use it as an internal measure in the claims group rather than an external measure to the operations people.
Josh, what's next?
I believe that's all the questions that have been asked. If anybody from the audience has any further questions, please please send them in, and we'll be sure to ask them for you.
I've got one question I'll address to Jim, but certainly, Rich, you can address it as well. Worker compensation claims, perhaps 4 or 5% of your employees have a claim, at least in any given year, and 95% of the people, therefore, don't. We feel it's very important to build a database around all of the employees so you can do a better job of linking performance and claims with the total exposures. And on that basis, I think have a better statistical model for identifying where there's cells of maybe based on age, gender, training that are unusual in their propensity for claims or losses. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Well, it's a great concept, looking at the losses that you have to do some predictive modeling, but then flip it on its head and not concentrate so much on what's driving the losses, but what's driving the 95% of the folks to not have claims. It's a great way to looking at a loss prevention program, is to reinforce the positive and not always concentrate on the negative, which sometimes is challenging, but it certainly is effective.
Rich, have you done any work along
I would
those
agree
lines?
with that. Yeah, we actually have a safety culture initiative called our DRIVE program, and one of the things that does is it looks to recognize the SAFE Act. I mean, we can all get out there and say, so and so didn't was speeding or didn't use a directional or things like that. But what's not often done is recognizing the things that are done right, and we actually measure and display in our various operations the observations that the operators themselves make of each other, and it's good to see when they're not afraid to let each other know when they fail, but it's great to see when they celebrate their successes as well.
Excellent. Well, I know that we talked, and there are indeed millions of records that are currently available, but it's using that information that's really critical. We have a webinar scheduled in November that you can find the details on our website that addresses some of the analytical methods that are available through some relatively low-cost software that we think adds a lot of value to the process of any database, whether it's from a TPA, an insurer, a RIMIS, and we look forward to your participation in that program. Josh, any more questions?
I do not believe we've received any more questions. I think we've answered everybody's concerns for today, and that's about it.
Let me just say in ending to a special thanks, a particularly special thanks to both Jim and Rich, whose jobs I know well enough to know how contended they are, and the fact that they spend the time with this just an educational focus is very, very appreciated, and we thank them very much for that effort. So with that, we look forward to your participation. I believe it's November the 20th, and have a great fall period. Thank you very much.